Hello artists, welcome back to day 3 of the 5-day still life painting challenge. You guys are doing amazing. I am so happy and excited that you're loving this challenge, that you're getting so much out of it, and you are doing amazing, beautiful work. Super excited for all of you. Today, day 3, we are going to be painting ta-da! Brass. We are going to be painting a brass bucket today. And so we're raising the stakes, right? As I said at the beginning, every day we're going to do something a little bit more challenging, a little bit more complex, but building on the prior day's learning. Okay, I just believe that this is such an effective way to really immerse yourself in the educational content and to actually have it stick. Actually have it make sense and stick in our brains. Yes, this is a good thing. Okay, so today's object is a highly reflective brass object, and we're going to be discussing the similarities and the differences with that brass object with the other objects we've already painted. Okay, so it's going to be similar to both of the objects we've already painted, but also different in that it is highly reflective. Okay, so let's dive in and get started. Okay, artists, let's dive in and push some paint around. So today we are doing this highly reflective brass, and like this antique brass bucket. And we're going to follow the same procedure that we've been following every day, and that is starting with our size and placement. This one is going to be more similar to what we painted yesterday, I would say, than the grape. It's just that the highlight is going to feel very similar to what we did on the grape yesterday, a couple days ago, because with brass, it's a very reflective. Okay, so I'm just going to use the raw umber here. And I really like this angle. I've got this brass bucket kind of tilted up here. And so I'm just going side to side with the brush just to get that angle. And then it's going to be sitting down on the table. This is going to be teeny tiny on this little surface here. I guess, what would this be? About, it's probably, so what is it? 8, so 4 inches. By 5, 4 by 5. So again, you're very welcome to, paint in a larger size if you want, if that feels more comfortable to you. I'm using a number 2 again to get this mass in. Okay, I think for this time I will make this a little bit bigger than I normally would, just for sake of demonstration. So we'll just grow this, and this is a good lesson in and of itself, like how would you change the size of something once you already have paint down, right? Okay, and then I want to just get the back edge of that bucket. I do have like something propping this up, so I'll just put some raw umber over here so it doesn't look like, why do we have a bucket levitating? All right, now for the ellipse you saw me do, this is all in shadow, and you just saw me do a simple flat shape to get this started. There is no reason to be agonizing over the ellipse. The most important part is that you make sure that you don't make this too wide this way, because it's foreshortened and in perspective. So we can see much more of the side of this bucket as it's in profile. So we just have to make sure we don't make this inside too big. And even if we do make it a little too big to start, we can always make it smaller with that background color. Now, on this object, it is a solid object like the orange yesterday. So we do have a form shadow, and the form shadow still describes the form. And this form is just like a tapered cylinder, okay? So your form shadows are always going to go with this side of the contour, right? Okay? Not with this side of the contour, with the side of the contour that they're closest to. And it's really important that you try to identify what is that basic geometric shape. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm really just going to wipe out where the big highlight is. because brass and copper is so highly reflective and metallic. It's actually a lot darker in value than we think it is. It's just the highlight is so intense that it makes us think that it's a darker value, a lighter value object, and that the color, what happens for a lot of people is they paint the overall color very brilliant, like what we did on the orange. But it's really only the highlight that gets that brilliancy of color. All right, so next we're going to move on to, I guess I'll go ahead and put in the handle or some suggestion of the handle, even though a lot of times that's easier to paint in after you have your background color. And as you see, I'm just using this small brush on the side. I'm just using raw umber again, just to get the suggestion of that handle, and then cast shadow under the handle. Cast shadow underneath all of this, actually underneath the whole thing on the whole tabletop, because the bucket is so big and it's casting a big cast shadow all on the tabletop. So all these darks kind of connect up here. So you definitely want to look to see where do my darks connect and come up with simple shapes, right? And then cast shadow underneath this bucket where it's hitting the cloth, which I'm really not going to paint in the cloth. Okay, so now let's get in some background color. I'm going to use the same mixture I used yesterday with the ultramarine blue, raw umber, and yellow ochre. And I should say too, there is one new color on the palette today, and that is cadmium lemon. Cadmium lemon, and the reason why I need that is for that highlight, because the cad yellow deep is just too orangey. You can see that the highlight on the brass is a little more in that yellow family. So that's our additional color today, but all the other colors are the same. Okay, a little bit of white here. I'm thinking I might want to make this maybe a little bit less green than what I had yesterday. Okay, I just want to get some background color in because I use that background color so much to carve with, to use as a neutralizer in the other colors. Here we're going to carve out this drawing shape a little bit more clearly. And then one thing about background colors, just so you know, is that they are usually darker up at the top, and then they tend to get lighter towards the bottom here, okay? Because light is hitting that tabletop plane. And so one way, even without any other objects in here, that we can get a sense of atmosphere is by making sure that we lighten up that background there. And you can see here what I was talking about earlier about how it's actually easier to paint that handle on top of the background instead of try to paint around it. So I'll redo that. But sometimes we just need to see the thing, right? Like we need to see where we're going, some level of finish right from the beginning. Okay, so next, I'm actually going to start first just with that really intense highlight, because if I don't, I really don't know like where I can go on the middle tone on this object. So I'm going to start with the end first, like the finish first. Some white, some cad lemon, a little bit, that might be a little too lemony yellow, so just a tiny, tiny touch of that cad yellow deep in there. And then once I get the color I want, and that's pretty darn good there, then I want to kind of scrape some up with my palette knife. And you can probably see that the larger the painting you go, the more and more paint you're going to need to use. All right, so I'm just going to, get some of this on here so that I have some idea of like, oh, make sure you don't go this light and bright on the other parts of the brass. But it just really gets that dramatic impact and that power and that oomph right away. So I'm seeing like, oh yeah, maybe we do need some more oomph with some more cad lemon. And I'm not afraid to build up texture here because this is a hammered pot, and I'm not afraid to put on too much paint or what might feel like too much paint. Okay, so then for the color that's around that highlight, I'm actually going to grab some of that background kind of greenish gray that I had. I'm going to add in my two yellows, my cadmium lemon and cad yellow deep, to get kind of a more neutral version of that highlight color. And there's no white. Whatever white is in there is the white that I'm picking up from the highlight right now. And then this bucket has like this kind of striation to it. So you can see I'm kind of mixing back into that highlight color with my brush strokes. But this is the most, this band, this top band here is the most lit up part of this bucket. And I can actually push and pull this paint around. So that's why I said, you know, let's push some paint around. Because my, really my brush is just, it's just like a tool to lay paint on, push and pull it around. It's not like I can't, you know, make more than one brush stroke. This is not like, oh, you can only make one stroke and then that's it. Okay, so now I'm adding back in some of my background color, which I ran out of, so I'm just having to mix it on the fly here, and that's okay. I actually prefer it that way. But some of that raw umber and my ultramarine blue in with those yellows, especially as we turn here, it's going to go quite a bit more neutral. And actually I see a little bit of the background reflecting right on the back edge. So that's one thing about metals, is that it's going to pick up whatever is all around it, okay? And then this is a little too green, so I'm going to add in a little bit of that cad red light and some cad yellow deep, because this part of the form, before it goes into that total shadow dark murkiness, is a little bit warmer. And you can see that I'm kind of putting in pieces of what they call broken color, and it's really just distinct brush strokes of, you know, a color that's a little more distinct, right? So I'm not blending it in that case, so that I get a little shimmer of cool and warm there, which is always, it's also really critical on metal to get that cool versus warm sensation happening, because it is such a reflective object. It's very similar to, you know, if you were to be painting flesh tone or something. Flesh tone, somebody's flesh tone might be predominantly a warm local color, but then in order for it to look fleshy and luminous and flesh-like, you have to have some cools in there as well. It just kind of gives it that luminous quality. All right, and then for shadow color, I'm really wiping all that white out of my brush, and I'm going to go back to my shadow mix, which is black, cad yellow deep. Need a little medium in there to get a little flow, just a tiny bit. You can see I don't actually use a ton of medium. It's mostly in the toning and then in the shadows. Now, I like to kind of go with the form, and instead of just filling in a flat shape, you know, I like to make sure that I make some curved strokes that go with that form to get more curve there. And then there is going to be some reflected light, so I'm going to go a little bit, add a little more cad yellow deep to go a little bit lighter there for some reflected light in the underplane. And why is that? It's because that metal is so shiny and reflective, so if I don't put in that reflected light, then it's not going to quite feel like metal. So this is the darkest value, and that is the inside of that bucket. So again, going back to that cad yellow deep, cad red light, ivory black mixture, because actually the value that's here is pretty good, but I need a little more glow, and the cadmiums really give shadow areas a really beautiful glowing sensation. Whereas raw umber and burnt umber sometimes by itself can just feel a little flat. Now it's going to pick up more glow again on the bottom much like the background. And can you see that that is consistency? There's a consistent logic there, and the logic is that light is hitting this top plane and bouncing light into the adjacent planes nearby. Okay, and then I'm going to do some black. I'm using ivory black, by the way, and cab red light for my darkest darks on this bucket design. And I'm basically just using the very tip of this number 2, you know, to get the darkest part of that metal handle in there. And you can also leave the handle out, okay? It's totally up to you. If you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to paint that handle, which, hey, I am with you. I definitely remember those days where I would edit things out, you know, and I always say, like, that's fine. You know, you have to start somewhere. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know? So if you don't feel comfortable painting that handle today, don't do it. You know, don't risk ruining your whole painting if you don't feel like you have the skill set yet to go there. Okay, so I'm trying to find kind of a grayish, purplish color for light on that metal. So I've got these neutral tones, this background color. I'm going to add in a little more black, and then I'm going to steal some of that red black from the shadow of it. But this little piece here, it does have light hitting it. So it needs to be cooler because we're doing cool light, warm shadow. But while this is a dull metal, this kind of gray, still light hitting it, but it's kind of darker in value, so I have to be careful, you know, not to go too light. Actually, I feel like that color would be really nice on the tabletop plane as well, perhaps, except it needs to be lighter. So let's add some black, some cab red light, in with that white and some yellow ochre to get kind of a warmish tabletop color, but it feels like cool light is hitting it. So it can't be too hot and pure. It has to be kind of more neutral. So then I want to get a little sensation of more warmth there. So a little more cad yellow deep, a little more cab red light into that mixture to pick up on some of those like red tones that's in that. Definitely has some of those kind of reddish tones in there. It looks like the grain of a wood table. Okay, good, good, good. And then if you want to, of course, just getting a little more specific on, let's say this highlight right on the rim, I'm just going to use some pure cad lemon and white to get this highlight right on the rim here. And I would rather, I'm trying to be specific with it, but I would rather it go down too gloppy than too thin. So you cannot sneak up on a highlight like that. You've got to put it on thick and bold. And then if it doesn't go where you want it to, you know, you can always pull some of that paint off, or like here, use your brush to kind of carve and adjust it somewhat, you know, but you can't, you have to paint with paint. You have to learn how to paint, you have to paint with paint, and you have to be willing to make mistakes and make adjustments and make errors. You know, it's just part of painting. Let's see, I'm gonna make a little more green, that background green color up. Sort of greenish gray that was in there, because I see like some little flecks of that color in the brass as well. And with these, whether it's a vase or a bucket, when they have like a lip on them, so to speak, you want to make sure that lip is a little taller. You know, it extends out from that cylinder. So I'm just trying to get a little suggestion of that in there. And then of course, let's see, that kind of threw my drawing off a little bit, and also my overlap. Sometimes whenever we adjust with that background color, it makes it start to look like the background is in front of the object, and we definitely don't want that to happen. Okay, everybody, I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope you learned a lot about painting reflective metallic objects. And I'm wishing you all so much success on this study today. All right, everybody, happy painting. Bye.